campers, welcome to another episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. We didn't even work out who was going to do the intro then, and I just jumped straight in. But hey, if you haven't joined us before, you're going to love our show. That's how confident we are. Subscribe via YouTube or via your favorite podcast app, and you can join in on the conversation at Snowy's Facebook show. I've done that before. Snowy's Camping Show Facebook group, where we'll interact or we'll sort of try and answer your questions. Also really keen to hear your thoughts and your experiences. I am joined as usual with my colleague Lauren, and today we've got a whole heap of notes here about quite a technical and a little bit confusing kind of topic around gas, managing gas, carrying gas, safety for camping, in particular LPG, and we'll sort of touch a little bit on liquid fuels and stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and you're going to love this, aren't you? Because you're all about the numbers and the calculations and the figures and all the really minute nitty-gritties that most people like me just are like, too hard.
Maybe on a simpler level. I might go a little bit too far in working out how much gas weighs and that sort of thing. But we probably should say too, there are regulations around LPG and that sort of thing. So what we say here today, please don't take it as gospel. It's what we understand. There are certainly references and it differs from state to state as well. A lot of the regulations around what you can carry. So take what we say as guidance, but please just double check anything around how much gas you can carry, how you can carry it, where you can carry it with your local regulations. So
yeah, definitely.
But obviously we'll start with LPG because the most common thing people take for camping and the easiest thing really is LPG. So we've got this gas cylinder in front of us here as small as that 1.25 kilo gas bottle.
1.25, yeah.
It's cheap to refill a gas bottle and gas stoves, you can pick up like a 2-burner gas stove for really easy. So it's a really affordable way to get a camp cooking solution for camping.
Definitely. Majority of camping stoves are LPG gas stoves anyway.
So
it's the most dominant fuel source for general camping.
Pretty much, there's no maintenance really. You plug it in. Well, when I say no maintenance, there is some around some safety elements, which we'll touch on. Refills are, we do it at the Snowy store in Adelaide here, but hardware stores, there's all sorts of places you can get refills.
And you can also do the swap and go because like if you're traveling, rurally or in the country, there will be BP often with a swap and go, but there's not many when you go out or into the sticks, not many people that offer the refill. Yeah. So the swap and go bottles are nifty as well.
Yeah, they're only the 9 kilo, I think.
Yeah, they're like 4.5 and 9. So they're good for larger requirements and things like that.
Right.
But I love the tiny ones that you can get that are refillable because means you don't have this huge big heavy thing that you're taking with you and that necessarily has to take up heaps of room, but they're also refillable. So unlike disposable canister options, you're not generating waste every time you finish it. So
and you get them re-stamped. The certification, it's actually illegal to refill one of these that's over 10 years old. And I'm seeing there's a date right on the side here. So this is tested.
What have you got? You got August
2020. Yeah. So you can't refill it past that date, but you can get it recertified. It just gets a test and make sure it's safe and you can refill it. So that's probably, I don't know, $50 or something, probably not even.
I've actually personally never done it. So I couldn't comment on it.
I don't think it's, I don't know. Actually, I'm looking, these are probably around about, I guess it depends on the size of the bottle. But anyway, you can have them recertified. You can also recycle them, I suppose. But but it's more of the point. You've got to carry them safely. Now, carrying them inside of your vehicle is not recommended and possibly even illegal in some instances for certain amounts of LPG inside a car. Now, I think it's okay to carry it from, say, refill to home, but if you're traveling long distances with a gas cylinder, strongly recommend, and I wouldn't do it. I think I did do it very early on, but just wouldn't carry it inside the car. And it's a risk of carbon monoxide poisoning, which not carbon monoxide. This is where it gets a bit technical and I haven't dug into the science of it all. So I'd be pretty keen if someone out there knows a bit more about it, but you can get carbon monoxide through incomplete combustion, but we'll touch on that a bit later. But if this leaks inside the car, then you've got LPG obviously inside the car and that's going to become an issue, make you sleepy, which you don't want when you're driving. So transporting these on the outside of the car. Now they're not the most easiest thing just to strap onto the car, right? And a lot of people don't have roof racks because that's the other thing is a lot of people just do car camping for the weekend and they don't necessarily have a big 4-wheel drive. They don't necessarily take a trailer. They don't necessarily have roof racks. It's not, do you know what I mean? So it can get a little bit tricky. Yeah. So in that instance, I guess if it's a short drive, people are probably inclined to just sort of throw it in the back of the car. But for long trips, I know for me, I've got a bracket that went on my roof rack to strap it down.
Yeah.
The downside of that is it's quite noisy, and I've moved to liquid fuel, which, like I said before, we'll go and do shortly. But that did make it pretty easy to transport the gas cylinder on the outside.
Well, liquid fuel stoves are a good alternative option for people who have no other option but to put a gas canister inside their car. It might be a safer one, but we can touch more on that later.
Yeah, interested in a few other people's thoughts on that too, because I've not been able to find anything definitive. But yeah, so you don't want to store them in an impact zone, obviously in the back of the car or something. If another car hits you, you don't want that in the impact zone of the car.
Absolutely.
And in an accident, these need to be strapped down well enough that they're not going to become a projectile. So I think plenty of people use like a milk crate on a roof rack.
Oh, yeah.
And strap the milk crate down and then secure it within the milk crate. So it makes it a little bit more secure. I don't know how, I don't think the milk crate's impact resistant. So in a high-speed accident, I'm not sure if that's going to, give it all the support, but it's going to help. And obviously making sure you store them upright and ventilated. So if it is in the car, try and avoid that, but make sure it's ventilated.
Same as well if you've got a caravan or a camper trailer, like just because it's separate to your vehicle, you still shouldn't be storing your gas inside those enclosed vessels.
Yep.
So it's often your camper trailer or your caravan, it should at least have sort of on the axle area there, the housing for a gas bottle to go. And if it doesn't, you can get the gas bottle cages to attach them, which is most commonly in that place because then they're outside of that impact zone because they're between the vehicle and your actual trailer and things like that.
Yeah. I touched on LPG leakage being an issue to make you dizzy or, pass out, but there's also a risk of explosion, I suppose. If even if so it's in my trailer, but it's in an enclosed little compartment on the side of my trailer, it's safe.
Yeah.
You go and open that and create a spark somehow, suddenly you've got all this LPG gas.
Can I just tell a really funny story?
Go on.
Because
this is a good lead-in, a good segue to a funny story. We've just talked about exploding gas bottles.
Yeah. So my partner, when he was young, he was in a really big family. And so as the oldest, he was in a caravan just next to the house and things like that. And it was just an old caravan. It was sort of out of commission, just left there on the property. And then it got to a point where it was like old and falling down and all this sort of stuff. And so they lived on a farm and they built this huge big bonfire and just around the caravan because they just was like burn the caravan down, huge big bonfire, all this waste and whatever. And then whilst the fire's burning, my partner looked up and saw that they hadn't removed the gas bottles from the caravan in this bonfire. So he's like, oh my God, run. And everybody at this big bonfire party just had to run and hide and the canisters were just like boom in this massive explosion. And they were empty and old and hadn't been used for a really long time. But once, everything sort of started to burn down and just see these two canisters in the fire.
They might be empty, but they're pressurized. So
totally.
That's. I guess it's funny because no one got hurt, right?
Nobody got hurt at all, and it's sort of funny because it happened historically. And I don't know, it's just one of those funny stories from your childhood of like, oh my God, this thing happened. But when you were talking about exploding gas canisters, just made me remember that.
I've never seen one explode, but I imagine it's a fair boom. So, and if there's gas in it, it's a boom followed by a large
fireball
flame.
Anyway, back to seriousness.
So please, when you're transporting the gas cylinders, just check with your local regulations, understand the dangers both for yourself inside the car and also for other users on the road. So just double check those things. I'm just going
to interject here because I've had people ask before whether or not it's safe to put your LPG canister in like a pod, like those plastic Pro Rack pods go on the top. And I'm not 100% sure about that. Like I haven't found any definitive guide, but because it's like an enclosed sealed space, I don't know how hot it would get because keeping it away from like direct sun when you're storing it and things like that, apparently when they heat up and because they're pressurized, they can sort of off gas a tiny little bit. I did read something about that. And so I'm not sure if that would be the case inside of a pod.
Well, there's a as far as I'm aware, there's a pressure release valve in this thing here. So if it gets hot, then it will release gas. If you can store it upright in a pod, it's better. If you're storing it sideways, which you shouldn't, you can then have an issue with actual liquid gas coming out into the pod.
Yeah.
So the issue then probably doesn't necessarily become explosion because they're a well-made product. They have to get very hot, like in the fire, like you explained before they explode. But the issue would be that suddenly you go and open the pod and you've got gas or the liquid gas is spilt in there and you've suddenly got a flammable environment.
Totally.
And it only takes a small spark for that to become an issue. So there's dangers there. So check your regulations. I know places like Gas is one place that a website I often refer to for a heap of information, and there's lots of local regulations too.
Department of Transport is, at least in SA, that's where I've found heaps of information for gas transport.
Yeah, okay.
So we'll have that in the show notes though, won't we? Links for that.
We'll put what we know in the show notes and we'll update it I'm sure there'll be people out there who've got other resources that are useful for people to read into and understand. So we'll add that into the show notes. So so we've rattled on about safety for a fair bit, but it is a really important thing with gas. Should touch on, I mentioned before, I've moved away from transporting LPG for a few reasons. These make heaps of noise on my roof rack.
Yeah.
These gas bottles. I also don't know how much is left. You kind of guess a bit, and I find myself paying for a full refill every time it's 3/4.
Yeah, because there's not many places that have the ability to test the capacity of it before they fill either.
So they just charge for a full fill, yeah. So I've moved to a liquid fuel stove because I can I can see more accurately how much fuel I'm using as I go. So we got a bottle of shellite in front of us here. I just take bottles of shellite and I actually got a old little ammo container that I put on my roof rack, and I can store 4 bottles of shellite up there out of the car.
What actually is shellite?
So this gets scientific again.
Okay.
I'm sure hopefully someone with a science background can jump in and maybe elaborate for those who are interested. But my understanding is a slightly more refined version of unleaded fuel. Most multi-fuel stoves will burn shellite and unleaded. Some of them diesel as well, but diesel is kind of a dirty burning fuel. Unleaded's pretty clean. Shellite's even cleaner. So
yeah, right. Yeah. It says just on here 100% hydrocarbon liquid for whatever that means.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's the cleanest burning fuel, so it's recommended for multi-fuel stoves because you don't get all the gunge and stuff built up in the stove.
Residues and things.
So it lengthens the time between cleaning it. But my theory is that I can store one of these bottles, especially if I've partly emptied it, and I can kind of squeeze a bit of air out. It gives a bit of room for expansion in the bottle.
That's a really good point.
And you can also use smaller bottles for transport, and I've got lots of small bottles. I'm happy to carry a little bit inside the car. Do
you use like the proper fuel bottles, like the MSR ones or Trangia specific smaller ones, or do you is that what you use, or do you just use?
Well, at the moment I've only just started using it, and I'm kind of tossing up whether I invest in a heap of those fuel bottles or just use these the ones that they come in.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of actually using just the ones they come in a
which for people who aren't watching is just like the clear bottle with a black lid, like Metho comes in and things like that from the hardware.
I mean, they're transported all over the country in those bottles, so they should be pretty safe.
Yeah, I would have assumed so.
Reuse them. So I'm probably going to have that in kind of a sort of maybe slightly foam lined my little ammo box, line it with foam so
that's a good idea.
It's not abrasive or anything.
Yeah.
Maybe inside the car though, I'm actually I've got an MSR fuel bottle that I've used for hiking, and I might just use that for a small amount, safely stored inside the car because you can tuck a little bit inside the stove.
Yeah.
That way I'm just having small amounts inside the car, and my fuel's split up a bit then, so if something happens with
that's
one,
a good point as well.
Everything. So I don't know the actual theory or the actual recommendations around transporting liquid fuel like shellite. There are guidelines around unleaded and diesel,
like actual like vehicle fuels stuff.
Fuels, yeah. I'm assuming because shellite's a slightly more, in my understanding, a slightly more refined version of unleaded. It's probably a similar sort of guidelines as unleaded, which you can't carry large amounts of inside a vehicle. Diesel apparently you can carry inside a vehicle because it's not actually classed as a volatile or flammable gas. It's slightly different properties.
Okay.
I still wouldn't really want to carry diesel inside my car because it's probably, if it does leak, it's stinky and you've got oily stuff everywhere.
That's gross. Yeah.
I mean, in all instances, I try and carry fuel on the outside of the car. But yeah, that's my theory behind moving away from gas bottles.
And I assume also because it's gas bottles are heavy even when they're empty. So it helps you cut down even more weight.
I like your thinking there. How much does it weigh? Yeah, good one. Well, so let's have a look at this, right? The tare on this. So I've got a tare weight 2.86 kilos and that holds 1.25 kilos of gas, right? So that's quick maths.
Hang on, what did you say the tare weight was?
So 2.86 plus 1.25.
So 3.86.
So over 4 kilos.
Yeah, 4.1 or something.
Yep, for 1.25 kilos of gas. Now you can try and work because I think gas weighs 500 grams per litre.
I think we've got here on the notes 1 litre of LPG weighs around 500 grams.
Okay. So let's just call it just under a kilo of gas, right? So that's over almost 4 kilos of gas for LPG, and I could carry 4 litres of shellite for that. Sort of, I'm doing the maths in my head here and trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about.
So essentially, like this is if a 1.25 kilo gas bottle is full, you're getting 1.25 kilos of gas for just over 4 kilos of total weight.
Yep.
Whereas if you were to carry the equivalent total weight in actual fuel, you're going to be getting closer to 5 litres.
Yeah, you've explained it better than
because like fuel weighs around about 750 grams per litre.
Thereabouts.
So for 4 kilos, you're getting closer to 5 litres of actual fuel, whereas for 4,
Yeah. And in my theory, if you work backwards against fuel consumption as well, the gas most gas stoves will consume sort of 400 to 500 grams per hour on full. A liquid stove, or the one I've got is the common one, they say 1.6 litres for 2.3 hours of burn time. If you kind of work that backwards, it's about 500 grams an hour of fuel thereabouts.
So in terms of actual consumption, whether it's gas or fuel, it's a bit of a muchness. I mean, obviously there are so many variables when it comes to fuel consumption for individual uses and situations and wind and all that sort of thing. But as a sort of general rule of thumb, it's like for like.
Pretty much, yeah. Because there's going to be, we touched on it before about the actual measurement should probably be amount of fuel per BTUs of output.
Yeah.
But that's going to change with weather conditions and how efficiently it's burning and all those sort of things as well. But in a nutshell, without getting too bogged down and without reading everyone's opinion on every forum out there that says this is best, that's best.
Can be a bit of a wormhole, hey?
It can be. 400 to 500 grams an hour is kind of what I've worked out.
Which is interesting because I know we're talking about storing and transporting using gas and whatever, and we're on sort of liquid fuels a bit here. But in terms of what stove you get or what fuel choices you're going with, if you're doing a trip or an outback trip, or you're going away for a while and you're going out to the sticks, fuel is going to be a lot more accessible for you than gas ultimately. And generally you might already be carrying fuel with you anyway for your vehicle. So it's sort of, so for a lot of people, those liquid fuel stoves do make a lot more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I can use unleaded in the stove that I've got as well. Try and use shellite wherever I can. My car is diesel, so I would be filling up like a little 1 litre fuel canister on the ground at the petrol station, which might look a bit silly, but
most people's cars probably would be diesel too, now that you mention that, I'd say.
Well, yeah, there's more petrol ones coming out now, but if you've got a petrol full drive, then you can just top up a little fuel bottle. You just you've just got a small one. Just make sure you put it on the ground when you fill it up, because it's got to be grounded. I think we touched on that later, to make sure when you fill the bottles, make sure it's grounded. It's a flammable thing again. So yeah, that's my rationale behind it. And I know with the shellite, I can see I've used this much. I've got roughly this many days left, and I can carry just the fuel that I need, instead of looking at a gas bottle going, I've got about half full, which gives me X many days, but I need just a bit more than that. I'm going to have to fill the bottle up and pay for a full fill again.
Yeah, totally.
Or I carry a second bottle, and then you go down the weight path again. And trying to strap it down safely. So that's my rationale behind it. I'll let you know in a few years after I've used it.
It's worth thinking about as well. Yeah.
Yep.
So in terms of, we've talked about transporting and touched on liquid fuels and things like that. In terms of actual usage of your gas bottle, because this can be a bit of a tricky one. And like, having worked in customer support for a really long time and taking a lot of phone calls, there's a lot of stuff that possibly we might look at and go, oh, that's just common sense. But for a lot of people, possibly it's not. And I think maybe because, gas and gas stoves and things like that, they're used so commonly. So often there's not much thought beyond just purchasing your stove and your gas bottle, or even your gas fueled heaters and things like that. So probably one of the biggest ones for me is you can't use a gas cooker or a gas heater or a gas appliance inside your tent or other enclosed space. You can't do it. Even if it's a gas powered camping heater, you can't use it in your caravan. You can't use it in your caravan annex. You can't use it in your tent.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so the I think it's AGA, they have.
I think there's 2 different gas boards that approve stuff, and it can take a long time to get things through that, which is why we don't see a lot of stuff here that's overseas because they're so strict. But they approve the gas things.
Yeah, and they've got like some good guidelines on what constitutes a ventilated space, and it's like it can have 4 walls and an open door as long as it doesn't have a roof.
It's a funny diagram, right?
Yeah,
that obviously comes with
you
gas. I've got it just here.
We're just looking it up on our
here we go. Yeah, you sent it the other day. So to us it seems like common sense, right? And it's just a little diagram of a house that kind of tries to have people understand just what a ventilated space is, and it comes on just about every gas appliance manual. It's obviously a legislation that has to be in there, but the reason behind. Do you understand the reason behind why you have to use it in a ventilated space? Have you looked into that?
Because of oxygen deprivation.
Well, that's partly because of it. It's more
actually,
okay, you don't.
Go on. No, go. You go.
It's carbon monoxide. So you might sort of think, but I've got a gas heater inside my house, right? There are things that are approved for indoor use and outdoor use. So even those outdoor gas heaters that you put under your patio, they're for outdoor use. The indoor ones are actually flued to remove the bad gases away from the living space. They've got that built into
the actual.
That's right, yeah. So it comes from oxygen deprivation, I think is one. And I've looked at this, but I don't know it in full detail. But oxygen deprivation, obviously, if you're in a small space and you're burning something, it's burning the oxygen in the air and you can kind of get sleepy.
Yeah.
But the other risk is carbon monoxide. That's the biggest risk is carbon monoxide. Now, I looked into a little bit of science here. So complete combustion, and I've scribbled the notes down here. I did, yeah.
I don't believe you.
Yeah, my wife would be proud of me. She loves science. She's a scientist. So.
That's good.
But propane and oxygen, LPG is a propane, right? So you put propane and oxygen, they burn. If you get complete combustion, you get carbon dioxide, water, and heat.
Right.
That's the output of those things. Now, the carbon dioxide kind of fills the space the oxygen's left after it's burned. So that's where the oxygen deprivation can become an issue. But if you've got ventilation, it disperses apparently quite easily in the air and it's not so much of an issue. Where there is an issue is where it's incomplete combustion. So if you've got a stove or something that's not operating efficiently, if you have propane and oxygen burning inefficiently, you get carbon dioxide, water, heat, and carbon monoxide.
Right.
Is the other.
Okay.
And that's the silent killer.
Okay.
I've got another little diagram on my phone here that I think I should. Oh, here you go, big yellow one that says carbon monoxide. Know the signs. So headache, dizziness, nausea, breathlessness, collapse, and loss of consciousness. So this can, if you're sleeping and that's in the area, you'll just go to sleep and you won't wake up because you just kind of get dizzy, you pass out and then you're done. So that's the big risk of using it in an enclosed space. So
essentially back to that diagram to make it really clear, being in, say, a caravan annex with the doorway open, it's not a ventilated space. If there are 4 walls, there has to be no roof at all. Otherwise, if you have a roof, it can only be 3 walls or less.
Is that what they say here? Is that what the diagram is?
So you can have 4 walls and an open doorway without a roof.
Oh, yeah. Two walls, a roof, and 2 open sides.
So 2 open sides.
So it's got to have 2 open sides, and then it gets a bit more technical.
Hang on, what's this? 3?
Oh, I don't know.
Is that 3 walls and an open side?
Oh, I don't know what that one is.
It's sort of, we'll put this up in the Facebook group too, I reckon.
So open side, 25% of wall area. Oh, they go into how much wall area there is, and then if you've got windows and you'll find it in the manual of any gas thing that you buy. I think the premise is just make sure you've got ventilation on
good
more
ventilation.
Than one side, cross ventilation that allows that to escape and more oxygen to come in.
Totally.
More oxygen too, you're going to get a more efficient burn from your device. So,
and I mean, obviously on top of the fact that if you are using a gas appliance in your tent, you could burn it down.
It's made of, I mean, there's canvas tents, right? But
totally.
Most of they're polyester, so they're highly flammable. And you don't really want that burning down over you. It'd be hot plastic stuck to your skin. Doesn't sound nice. So.
Yeah, totally.
We've totally lost track of our flow here, and we've just kind of gone off on a tangent. Well, not a tangent. We're still within the ballpark. Oh, we should talk about with using things within guidelines. So that's where we started with this, with that diagram of using it in the right space.
Oh yes, of course, yeah.
But there's also guidelines around obviously safety with a gas bottle. I mean, we're all guilty of just kind of screwing the hose on the gas bottle, screw it on the stove, and we light it up and use it, right? What we should do is test for leaks before we light anything, because you think you've got gas coming out the burner, but if you've also got gas coming out of your gas bottle, then that becomes a risk of.
And also things like, your seals and your hoses and whatever, if it's been a while since you've gone away, they can just deteriorate with time in storage and things. So as part of your like pre-trip check, you could also just do a gas test and things like that. And then that way when you do go away, you can be really confident in your hose, confident in your seals, and then you don't have to necessarily like test it every single time you want to use your stove because you're sort of covered with that.
Yeah.
So that's just like good practice, I think, to get in the habit of doing.
Yeah, take a few spare O-rings and stuff with you as well because they can pop off and, in the campsite you lose them. And don't ever use homemade sort of adapters or connect hoses together. There's rules around how many hoses you connect together and just how it's connected together. That's why you can only buy hoses in certain lengths. It's not, you can't just connect 10 meters of gas hose and expect it to work. It's going to affect the performance of the device. It's also a danger, and there's actually laws and regulations around doing that for the safety of everyone else around you. So
and trying to sort of like bypass regulators or replace regulators that aren't specific to the actual the appliance. Don't do it.
It's going to affect the performance of the appliance. And don't stack a heap of connectors together. Like, I want to try and get this to fit this. You're probably best going to a gas fitter and having them make something specifically for you, because they'll know how to make it safely if it can be done safely.
Totally.
If you can't find a connector from A to B, there's probably a good reason why it doesn't exist.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's not safe.
I would 100% agree with that. Yeah. Going back to the leak test, also, for people who maybe aren't familiar with that or haven't done it before, we do have a blog post on it that you can go and reference. Did you write that blog?
Or probably combined with other people.
Yeah.
There was someone external to us who come in and helped us write that to try and be technically accurate as well in those things.
So that's good. So check that out as well. That'd be really important. And we'll put the link to that in the show notes too.
Yeah, whatever we can find. This is a really important topic, so any extra information we'll find, we'll put links in.
Yeah.
And obviously the obvious thing, I think you covered it before, keeping away from the tent, but also don't put your stove right next to a bush or something. Keep that flame away from everything that's flammable, same as you would with a campfire, really. Even around the base of the stove, just clear some stuff around in case something hot falls off, or your pancakes catch fire and it falls on the ground. You don't want that to then light up all the dry leaves on the ground. So just be mindful about it.
Absolutely.
And don't leave them unattended. Don't just leave your stove burning away.
Yeah, that's true. Or your heater or your lantern or anything, just don't leave it unattended, because that's bad news.
Yeah. Okay, safety. Have we feel like we've just as
the only other thing we sort of probably haven't touched on yet is disposals.
Yeah, so you can. I got rid of a heap of scrap metal on the weekend, and I saw at the scrap metal place where you go and get cash for scrap. They've just got a big container there full of empty LPG containers, so you can recycle them. So, but don't chuck them in the bin. Or anything.
Like these, probably also worth a mention. These propane canisters, I think Coleman make them now. They're like about 450 grams or so. They are not refill. They're single use, but they're growing in popularity because of their convenience. They're, a bit more lightweight. They're small. But again, as I said, they're single use. So please make sure that you dispose of them properly or you recycle them properly, because just getting some feedback from, say, like KeySab, Keep South Australia Beautiful, and a couple of there's a gentleman who may be listening to this, if he is, hello, who was talking about how he volunteers to clean up rubbish and stuff rurally, and the common propane bottles are increasingly prevalent as trash left over at campsites,
right?
Because people don't want to take them back and they don't want to go to the hassle of recycling them or disposing of them properly. So if you do choose to use them for convenience perspective, please make sure that you're doing the right thing with getting rid of them. And if you're not, or it's not really convenient for you to do so, consider getting a smaller refillable LPG gas canister instead. Yeah,
because these are a fairly sort of like they almost feel like they're refillable, don't they? They're a fairly
They do feel like they're refillable.
Solid sort of unit.
Yeah, they sort of should be, but they're not. So that's a really important consideration to make.
There's this same thing goes for the butane, like those lunchbox stoves, the butane canisters you get in those, and also they're like little hairspray can butane. That's right. And your isobutane hiking stoves with the Lindell valve on top.
Oh, Lindell valves,
like they should be disposed of properly. As well.
Yeah, totally.
There is, I think, JetBall make it's
called a can crusher.
Or cruncher or something like that. That will actually pierce the thing. I think you need to make sure it's empty. There's some guidelines around it, and pierce it. means that it can then be disposed of safely in the rubbish so that it doesn't become an explosion risk. So just have a think about how you get rid of those things.
Totally. And the same sort of thing for storing your gas canisters at home applies. Keep it away from direct sunlight and heat. If it's in your shed, keep it in a cool, dark place that's plenty of ventilation, things like that. It's just a lot of it is common sense. Ultimately, isn't it? It
is. Transport of those canisters we were just talking about too. Same thing applies with the larger canisters, because we touched on these big LPG ones, but those butane ones, it's very easy to pick up a 4-pack of them and just chuck it in the car. But don't leave it sitting in a really hot part of the car. Like store it somewhere considered so that it's, because they will leak if they get too hot. There's a pressurized thing. So you don't want to leave them in a really hot car. You know, if you've left your car parked in the heat for a few days, you probably actually want to take that gas out and put it somewhere in a safer spot or a ventilated spot so it's not leaking inside the car. So same thing applies with all of those things, which is why I'm moving to liquid fuel.
Moving to liquid fuel. Yeah. Well, it is a good consideration. So I guess ultimately make sure when you are traveling, you're storing your gas bottle safely. And needing to check in with your state authorities for the actual guidelines and legalities on doing that. When you're using your gas in and around a campsite, make sure you're doing it safely. Do your gas bottle maintenance, check your seals, your O-rings, your hoses, all of that sort of stuff. Don't leave it unattended. Don't leave it in an unventilated space. Store it safely at home. Consider liquid fuel as well. If carrying gas there are limitations for you or possibly you know, you're having access issues with gas, consider liquid fuel stoves. And
it'd be good to know if any other people's experience on carrying shellite, or if there is. I haven't been able to find any specific regulations, as I mentioned, even on this, if it's a flammable liquid class 3, right? Even if you go to some of the MSDS and stuff, they don't really go into too much detail about transport of that and what's considered safe. So I've applied some of my own logic there, but it'd be really good if we reached out to a few boards to try and get some information before we recorded today, but we haven't got anything official back. So it'd be good to, maybe we will, and when we do, we'll make sure we post that information.
Yeah, and if anybody out there listening does use liquid fuel stoves or use gas and converted to liquid fuel recently, I mean, it's fairly new for you and me in terms of that as a fuel option, but there's going to be people out there who've been using it for a really long time. So get in touch on the Facebook group or even comment on YouTube and share your experiences. That'd be really great.
Specifically for 4-wheel drive, because I've used it for hiking for many years, which isn't as much of an issue. It's in a backpack, and
of course,
but in a vehicle, there's other considerations. So
totally.
So let me know if my logic's sound or if I'm doing the wrong thing.
I'm sure you'll be fine. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning in again. Don't forget to join us on the Snowy's Camping Show on Facebook and give us some feedback on the episode or ask questions, all of that sort of jazz. Subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast as well. Give us a like and subscribe on YouTube if you're watching too. And other than that, we will catch you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. That was a good chat.
Thanks, folks.
Cool. See ya.